Hey there, folks, and welcome out to the Single Player Podcast. I'm your one and only host, I'm16-Bit, and I got a good show for this week because we're going to be talking about the end of Stadia, rumors about Microsoft's acquisitions, and a new Silent Hill gets rated, plus more. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and I'll be with you in a bit. Alright, folks, and we're back, and now it's time to start the show with my favorite segment, your favorite segment, everyone in the world's favorite segment. It's time for the gaming forecast. So let's see what's coming out in the week of October 9th to the 15th. Okay, on October 10th, you have just one game coming out, 9 Years of Shadows for Windows. Then on the 11th, you have 3 games coming out. Asterigo's Curse of the Stars for Windows, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Kamiwaza Way of the Thief making its North American debut on Windows, Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 4. And No More Heroes 3 also making its North American debut on Windows, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Then on the 13th, you have 7 games coming out. Asterix and Obelix XXL, The Ram from Hibernia for Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, and Xbox Series X. Dragon Ball The Breakers releasing exclusively in Japan for Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. The Eternal Cylinder for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. The Last Ori Crew for Windows, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X. Lost Eidolons for Windows, Trifox for Nintendo Switch, and WRC Generations for Windows, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Then on the 14th, you have 8 games coming out. Dragon Ball The Breakers making its Western debut on Windows, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. Kamiwaza Way of the Thief releasing in Europe on Windows, Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 4. NHL 23 for PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. No More Heroes 3 making its European debut on PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. PGA Tour 2K23 for Windows, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Saint Kotar for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. Scorn for Windows and Xbox Series X. And Trifox for Windows, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. Then on the 15th, you have just one game coming out, Figment 2, Creed Valley for Windows and Nintendo Switch, and that was your gaming forecast. Some interesting stuff there. Not gonna lie, Dragon Ball, always nice to see Dragon Ball, as well as No More Heroes 3 coming out for newer consoles. Anyway, with that being said, just remember that these dates are subject to change. It happens all the time, so just keep that in mind that maybe sometimes these games will be moved to a later date, or newer games will be added to the list. You never know. But also, remember that if you liked any of the music that will be played in this week's episode, that links are in the description. So anyway, let's move on to our first topic. Alright, and so for our first story, we gotta talk about Stadia. I'm sure many of you already heard about this, but for those who don't, recently Google put out a press release written by Phil Harrison, the Vice President and General Manager of Stadia. And he said the following, and I quote, "For many years, Google has invested across multiple aspects of the gaming industry. We help developers build and distribute gaming apps on Google Play and Google Play Games. Gaming creators are reaching audiences around the world on YouTube through videos, live streaming, and shorts, and our cloud streaming technology delivers immersive gameplay at massive scale. A few years ago, we also launched a consumer gaming service, Stadia, and while Stadia's approach to streaming games for consumers was built on a strong technology foundation, it hasn't gained the traction with users that we expected. So we've made the difficult decision to begin winding down our Stadia streaming services. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Stadia is officially shutting down. Now, if you go back to the very first episode of this podcast, July 22nd, 2019, I talked about the Stadia, and I said I had no faith in it. I do not see this as being a success, and I listed mainly the fact that you're charging full prices for games you can't even download to your devices. I called it a ripoff, and I said it's not going to be a success. Guess who was right, motherfucker? Yeah, I called this shit. I fucking called it. Of course Stadia wasn't going to be a success. A blind, crack-addicted monkey could see that this was not going to succeed. Hell, you could even say that Google was basically foreshadowing in their own demise when they basically displayed it alongside the Power Glove and the Dreamcast, alright? They basically knew that this was not going to be a massive hit. And the fact that they carried on for so long, like I thought this thing was going to die maybe a year or two ago, alright? I did not expect it to last 3 years. Now, there is some good news, and it does sort of continue, because it says, and I quote, "We're grateful to the dedicated Stadia players that have been with us from the start. We will be refunding all Stadia hardware purchases made through the Google Store, and all game and add-on content purchases made through the Stadia Store. Players will continue to have access to their games library and play through January 18th, 2023, so they can complete final play sessions. We expect to have the majority of refunds completed by mid-January 2023. We have more details for players on this process on our help center." So I'll give them this, okay? At least they're refunding people. You know, if I had gone full force with this and it just dumped a whole bunch of money on it, I would be on Google's ass demanding a refund. So I'm glad to see that no one actually has to do that Google is offering refunds for any hardware or games or whatever, and that they're letting people finish up their games until January 18th, all right? That's fine, but once again, folks, let this be a lesson of what I have been saying for years, what I will continue to say, screaming into the heavens. This is why everyone should fear an all-digital future. Because imagine if Stadia was successful. Imagine if it was a success, okay? Then you would have every gaming company, every major publisher trying to do the exact same thing. I mean, hell, Amazon's already doing it. I think Netflix is getting ready to do something as well, okay? Let's hope that Amazon and Netflix looks at this and says, okay, maybe this isn't exactly the greatest idea in the world, and actually starts backing off of their own services. You know what? Netflix is right now, things are not really looking good for their future. So maybe they should look at this and say, yeah, we should have second thoughts about starting up our own streaming gaming service. So anyway, with that being said, let's move on to our next story. Okay, and for our next story, I thought this one was actually really interesting. So recently, Bandai Namco has decided to add another division to their company, and this time it's not entirely video game related. Instead, it's their own music label. Yeah, they've officially announced what they're calling the Bandai Namco Game Music Label. I'm not making that up. That is exactly what it's called. And they put out a press statement saying, and I quote, "Since the first video games and all throughout the history of the industry, music has always been a core component of the gaming experience. Music made the game's memories last longer and followed the players into their daily lives with amazing soundtracks to go back to and relive the stories they played. We strive to delight our fans with more than just games, so we decided to bring the video game music to as many listeners as possible with the release of 2 digital albums of game background music." And so far, they've only released 2. One being, of course, Elden Ring, and the other being Tales of Arise. So very interesting. I, of course, expect to see more in the future. And it's got me thinking about what other games I'd like to see get official soundtrack releases. And the one that really kind of that kind of popped in was the Namco Museum games, but not the later ones. I'm talking the 5 PS1 games, because those had some fantastic soundtracks and some great remixes of classic arcade themes. In fact, it's one of those few PS1 games where you can actually pop the disc into your PC and rip the soundtrack off because they're separate files from the actual game. I'm also thinking of stuff like Ridge Racer, Tekken. Tekken would be great. Klonoa would be awesome. I kind of wish we would get that. That would get an official soundtrack release, especially since with the recent collection that just came out. Also, Katamari Damacy, because Katamari, like, that franchise has such great music that it's a damn shame that it never got any sort of official release. So I'm happy about this. I think this is a really cool idea. And you know what? I look forward to seeing what other game soundtracks they're going to release in the future. Anyway, guys, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
吉田様、社長室へ。
あ、はい。あ、
あらま。
失礼します。
新ルール転がして巻き込む塊魂この春デビュー。
プレイステーション。
Alright folks, and we're back, and first up on our next round of stories, we have a rumor regarding Microsoft's acquisitions. So, as you know, last week I talked a bit about how Microsoft is planning more acquisitions. Phil Spencer said this on a segment on, I think it was CNBC, and it's gotten a lot of speculation going as to who Microsoft's going to acquire next. Well, according to an anonymous source, it might be coming from Japan. Recently, Imran Khan was on the Giant Bombcast, and according to him, an anonymous source within Microsoft told him that they're very interested in major Japanese publishers. He said, and I quote, "Microsoft is very clearly interested in some major Japanese publishers, along with smaller studios." So, yeah. Now, keep in mind that this is just a rumor, so always take that with a grain of salt. Okay, because I've seen it numerous times where anonymous sources make claims and people just randomly believe it. But that being said, this one actually does line up with a couple of things. First off, you have Phil Spencer's comments from a couple of weeks ago where he said that, of course, they're planning more acquisitions. You also have the fact that the Xbox Series X is actually doing really well in Japan right now. It's surprising, I know, but they've actually done pretty well. And a lot of that is mostly because of Sony's failings and the fact that they've essentially abandoned Japan. to the point where the entire PlayStation brand is basically dead. I remember hearing, I think it was like last year or 2 years ago, there was an analysis group that came out and said that basically the entire PlayStation brand is dead over there. So Microsoft has been kind of coming in and taking over Sony's past turf, though still they would have to compete against the Switch and mobile. You also have the fact that Microsoft announced a partnership with Kojima Productions. And of course, that's one of the studios that a lot of people are looking at as a possible acquisition, especially since, according to the source, they're looking into smaller studios. Now, despite that, I'm hoping that this rumor is just complete and utter bullshit, because honestly, I don't like this idea of Microsoft, Sony, or even Tencent, definitely Tencent, going out and acquiring all these studios. I don't think it's exactly healthy, and I don't think it's a good idea for Microsoft to continue acquiring studios. Like, I understand what Spencer was saying in that, you know, we can't just stop, we're competing against Sony and Tencent. I get that, but there's a point where you have to look at what you have and kind of be like, okay, this is enough. You know, you just dropped $70 billion on Activision-Blizzard. You own God knows how many IPs, all right? At that point, you have to look at what you have and just say, okay, this is enough, you know? Because here's the thing. If you continue acquiring all these studios, that's just going to escalate this into an all-out acquisition war between Sony and Tencent and Microsoft. And that, to me, is just unhealthy for the industry. And could possibly even start another game crash. You know, who knows at this point. So, I don't like this idea of Microsoft going out and buying all of these studios, and I definitely don't think that this is good for the industry. So, let's just hope that this is just merely that. It's just a rumor, it's complete bullshit, and it's not actually true. So, anyway, let's move on to our next story. Okay, and so for this next one, we have to talk about Warner Discovery. So, as most of you know, Warner and Discovery merged a couple of months ago, and ever since then, the new president of the company, David Zaslav, he's been going through things on the Warner Brothers side and just kind of basically canceling everything. A lot of shows that had been running for quite a while just got inexplicably canceled and removed from streaming services. And many of these shows never had physical releases. So the only way you could watch them was digitally, and when those went away, that was it. You can't watch it anymore. Which is another reason why I always keep telling people you should fear an all-digital future. So, why am I talking about this? Well, because it seems that Shenmue the animation is one of the victims of this. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The animated adaptation of Shenmue has been officially canceled. The news came out when CN News tweeted out that several shows had been removed from Adult Swim's website, including Shenmue the animation, and the senior VP of animation at Cartoon Network, Jason DeMarco, confirmed it, saying, and I quote, "Sorry guys, this happened. You can still watch all of the anime on Crunchyroll, and it will still be available as digital downloads, and yes, it's looking like no Season 2 is Shenmue. Even though, sadly, it did well enough that we were gearing up for Season 2. Maybe one day." Now, I'm going to be quite frank, I am not the biggest fan of Shenmue, and I didn't really get to really watch the series. Look, I have Shenmue on the Dreamcast, and I have Shenmue 2 on the Xbox. I tried playing them, and I couldn't get into it. It's just not for me. But I do know the series has a dedicated fan base. And you know what? I heard a lot of good things about Shenmue, the animated series. So it's kind of a shame I never actually was able to watch it myself. In fact, I checked because I have HBO Max, which I mostly use. I've mostly been using it to watch South Park and the British version of Ghost, which, by the way, I gotta say, the American version's alright. The British version, however, much better. Highly recommend it. Anyway, but I just did a quick check, and yeah, it's not on there. You can't watch it on HBO Max. So, it's a shame that, unfortunately, you can't legally watch it. Of course, if you, I don't know, sail the high seas, you might actually find it, but I don't know where you would get anything like that. No, sorry. Whew, excuse me, I must be coming down with a cold, but anyway. Now, here's the thing. I understand kind of why they're doing a lot of this stuff. And it's not just Shenmue, it's a lot of animated series from Cartoon Network and Adult Swim that have been greatly hit by this. I kind of understand it because they're looking at the finances of Warner Brothers, and they're seeing if they can basically use any of them as tax write-offs. But at the same time, I don't understand why it's necessary to remove them from all streaming platforms. To me, that makes no absolute sense. You can still have these shows on streaming platforms. You don't have to completely remove them, you know? It's not like you're going to be losing a shit ton of money just having them on the streaming platforms themselves. So I think it's a bit ridiculous and overkill to just completely remove this stuff. Especially, once again, since a lot of these series do not have physical releases. So I think Warner Discovery is just being way too hasty with stuff. I understand, you're looking at the finances, you're trying to make sure that everything is profitable, but removing these shows from streaming isn't going to fix that situation. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, let's move on to our next story. Okay, and this next story has to deal with a franchise that we haven't heard from in almost 20 years, that being the Legacy of Kain. So as you all know, Crystal Dynamics and Eidos were recently purchased by Embracer Group, and because they've occasionally mentioned Legacy of Kain, it has a lot of people wondering if we will ever return to Nosgoth. And well, that might actually be the case, because Crystal Dynamics has put out a new survey asking fans about the franchise. Yeah. Now, I took the survey, and the questions themselves were very interesting. They asked you about which games you have played, which ones are your favorites, how you would rate each game and such, and which one you prefer, Raziel or Kain. It also asked the question of which ones you would want to have, a remaster of the original games, reboot, sequel, or a remake. So they're definitely testing the waters about whether or not people are interested. And so I'm going to put a link to the survey in the description, and I ask you, all of you, for the love of God, please answer this survey, because you know what? Fans have been asking for a new game for close to 20 years, okay? We never got a damn thing out of Square Enix. So please, I beg of you, take the survey. Let them know we want this franchise to return. It's been far too long. And you know what? I wish they would also bring back some of their other franchises as well. You know, bring back Gex. Bring back Pandemonium. You know, that stuff was actually really good. You know what? I actually think a remake of the Gex games would actually be pretty nice, you know? Because they were solid platformers on the original PlayStation. The first game was alright, but the second and third were top-notch. Actually, the third one graphically was pretty impressive. But of course, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's just hope that they at least bring this franchise back. And hopefully, if it does well enough, we might see the other ones return as well. But anyway, guys, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
My name is Ryo Hazuki. Since my father's death at the hand of Lan Di, I've been engaged in a quest for vengeance. That explains the martial arts training, the dangerous addiction to billiards, and my association with Nozomi. Now, if you'll let me go, I wish to resume my journey.
Shenmue on Dreamcast, rated T for teen.
Alright folks, we're back, and first up in our last round of stories, we have some interesting news about Silent Hill, because it seems that a new game has been rated in Korea. Oh yeah, so this news came out of Gematsu, and apparently they spotted a rating on the Game Rating and Administration Committee of Korea's site, where they've listed a brand new Silent Hill game called Silent Hill: The Short Message as rated. Now, what's interesting is the publisher is listed as Uniana, and apparently they actually have a history of publishing Konami games in Korea. Now, of course, no platforms or release dates have been announced. I actually find that first one quite interesting because, you know, you hear a lot of these rumors about a brand new Silent Hill game and how Sony bought out the franchise and all that kind of shit. So the fact that they didn't list a platform, I think that's a little telling. That if a new Silent Hill game is to come out, it's going to be multi-platform. It's not going to be PlayStation exclusive like a lot of these rumors claim it's going to be. But here's the thing. I can't really get excited for this. I know a lot of people are getting excited for it, and a lot of people are like thinking this is the greatest thing and such, but I can't. Because if I'm being quite frank, the series hasn't been good since the 4th game. Yep, I said it. Look, it's not that the later games are bad survival horror games. They're actually pretty good at it. It's just they're not good Silent Hill games, if that makes any sense. I get the feeling a lot of developers who pick up the franchise don't really understand it. You know what I'm saying? Like for example, play Silent Hill Origins and compare it to the older games, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It doesn't feel like a Silent Hill game. It feels like someone's idea of what a Silent Hill game is supposed to be. If you want another really good example of people not really understanding Silent Hill, just read the comics, because they're god-awful. Now, Downpour and PT get pretty close, but there's just something about them that they're just a bit off from kind of recapturing that magic of the first 4 games. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it. There's just something about those first 4 games that no other Silent Hills has ever been able to recapture. But that's just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. And with that being said, let's move on to our next topic. Okay, and next up, we have some news coming out of Activision-Blizzard, because it seems one of the executives has officially stepped down. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. It seemed Frances Townsend, who was the Chief Compliance Officer, has stepped down from her position at Activision-Blizzard and is now serving as an advisor to the board and Bobby Kotick. Now, what's interesting here is, of course, this apparently happened just before the announcement about the buyout from Microsoft. So, if I'm being quite frank, and for legal reasons, I'm going to say that this is just me speculating, that I find it kind of suspicious that that she leaves just before that happens. And in my opinion, most likely she's trying to do it, again, speculating here, she's only doing this just to cover her own ass, because of the upcoming lawsuit that's coming out against Activision-Blizzard. That's what I think is happening. Again, I'm speculating here. But yeah, it's apparently she's been very much she's been under fire in the past for some of her comments about the whole lawsuit. For example, she claimed the allegations were distorted and false, and she's also she tweeted a link to an article called "The Problem with Whistleblowing" on one of her Twitter accounts. So yeah, definitely she is one of these slimy executives that's basically trying to cover her own ass, allegedly. So yeah, you know what, again, don't be surprised if you start seeing a lot of these executives trying to get out of Dodge as fast as they can, especially with this lawsuit coming up. And let me tell you, they're going to get, I guarantee you, the higher-ups, including Bobby Kotick and the board, they're going to get their asses handed to them because of this entire thing. Either that, or Bobby Kotick leaves and says, well, you see, I have nothing to do with this, because I'm no longer part of the company. Executive logic there, you know. But yeah, you know what? I think that this is only the beginning. You're going to see a lot of other executives leave the company as fast as they possibly can as Microsoft comes in, tries to clean up their image, and this lawsuit starts up. You know, it's gonna be a bloodbath. You definitely know it's gonna be an outright bloodbath. So, oh boy, Activision-Blizzard, what happened to you? What happened to you? Especially Blizzard, man. They used to be so great. They used to be one of those studios that whenever you saw their logo, you knew it was a sign of quality. And now they're just a shadow of their former selves. It really is sad to see Blizzard just become this bloated, just disgusting version of what it used to be. But anyway, let's move on to our next story. All right, and for our last story, we got some news coming out of Nintendo because, as some of you may know, I talked a couple of months ago, actually, about how Nintendo had acquired Dynamo Pictures. They're a CG animation studio, and they've worked on various projects, both gaming and non-gaming related, including Final Fantasy XIII-2, Space Pirate Captain Harlock, and they did the motion capture for Death Stranding. Well, they've officially changed their name to Nintendo Pictures. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Nintendo now has their own in-house movie studio, or at least animation studio, if you want to call it. Now, they're not hiring yet, so if your expertise is in CG animation, you're going to have to wait until November to apply. But still, hey, there's something for you to look forward to. Now, speaking of Nintendo and CG animated movies, we've got to talk about the Mario movie. Now, tomorrow, the Mario movie Direct will be happening, and so I won't be covering that until next week. But in the meantime, let's talk a bit about the poster Nintendo put out. And I gotta say, any reservations that I had about the Mario movie is kind of been put aside, because I can tell you that the poster looks fantastic. It looks like what you would expect from a Mario game. And that's, I think, what a lot of people were kind of were worried about, that this thing would not exactly be like the Mario, be like the games, or look anything like them. But no, it looks like they've basically captured exactly how the game should look. And you know what? Fine by me. Now, of course, we still have yet to see the trailer, and going by Illumination's history, the humor might not exactly be that good, but still, I have a lot of high hopes for it, because you know what? Unlike the past Mario movie, Miyamoto actually is involved with this one. In fact, Nintendo entirely is involved with it. So you definitely know that it's not going to be that caliber. You know, it's not going to be as bad as the one with John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins, you know. So fingers crossed. So far, I like what I'm seeing, but fingers crossed, and let's hope and pray to God that it's actually a good movie. Anyway, guys, I'm going to take a short break, and we'll be right back after this.
Hey kids, I'm here to tell you about two extremely famous cloners, Mario and Luigi Mario, from the Super Mario Bros. Movie. You wanna know what makes them super? Cause they triumph over the evil Koopa and his brainless sidekicks, Iggy and Spike, using only their plumbing tools, and they battle the Goombas. Koopa's hideous dino-human army. Those Goombas are scary. The Super Mario Bros. Action figures from Ertl. But don't worry, they're not real.
right, folks, we're back, and that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for listening. Remember, if you liked any of the music in this week's episode, links are in the description. There's also a playlist of all the past music I've played on the show, and in fact, now that I think about it, I have to update it. I forgot to. I kind of been forgetting to do it for the past several weeks, so I got to remind myself to do that. But anyway, with that being said, I want to thank you all for listening. I'll see you next week, and remember to keep gaming.